Yo, what's going on guys, it's your boy Point here, and welcome to a video that I've been going back and forth on making for ages now, and that is, as the title suggests, the dumbest debates in Persona. Now, I came up with the concept for this video a while ago, since in the 4 years since I got into this franchise, I have noticed that Persona fans tend to argue about the dumbest shit. And I don't mean it in things like how Sonic fans argue about the length of Sonic's quills or the shade of blue in his fur not being dark enough. No, not like subjective stuff that all comes down to opinion at the end of the day. I mean stuff that can be sorted out after 5 seconds of thought. And I don't even mean like critical thinking, just like normal everyday thoughts that every person has. That's how easy these things are to work out. So I thought it would be a fun idea to go through some of the dumbest arguments I've seen over the years and see just how dumb they are. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Also, this video does contain spoilers for Persona 5 Royal. Just thought I should throw that in there. That wasn't in the original script, but yes, this video does contain spoilers for the new content of Persona 5 Royal. I know it's a little bit redundant since it's so old at this point, but I thought it was worth letting people know nonetheless. Okay, so I'm going to try not to spend too much time on this first one since I've actually already made 2 whole videos on this subject, but I couldn't make a Persona debates video without mentioning this since it's a debate that was really prevalent for a long time. Not so much anymore, but was for a long time. Even though it really shouldn't have existed in the first place, and yet people still got insanely violent about it, so I think it warrants a mention regardless. For those who aren't aware of this whole thing, the basic gist is that whenever Atlus announced Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 Strikers, they stated that they focus on writing Strikers as more of a sequel to vanilla P5 as opposed to Royal, since both games were in development at the same time, and so the people that played vanilla P5 would be able to pick up the game without being confused, since both it and Royal were coming out only 4 months apart. At least in Japan, they came out like a year apart over here, but that's not the point. Seems like a reasonable reason not to include Royal characters, right? Well, the problem arose when a bunch of news websites started running headlines saying that Atlus had confirmed that Strikers and Royal weren't canon to each other. And of course, in this modern world of people only reading headlines, not actual articles, people took the whole thing at face value. Don't do that, by the way. Reading only headlines is like half the problem with the internet nowadays. As a result, we got a bunch of extremely angry people online arguing the same stupid point about, oh, if Royal's canon, then why isn't Sumire in Strikers? And if Royal's canon, why don't they mention Maruki? And despite the fact that both of these things can be easily explained away, like maybe Sumire's on a gymnastics trip or something. She goes on a lot of those during Royal's story. Maybe she just isn't close enough friends with any of the thieves besides Ren to really justify meeting up with them for the summer. Maybe these people missed the part of Royal where she never officially joins the Phantom Thieves and therefore really has no reason to be there. And for Maruki, there's just never really a point where he's relevant to bring up. Like, I guess you could make the argument he would have been relevant to bring up with Ichinose, but like, wouldn't really prove much of a point, right? Like, I don't know, dude, let's just move on. Alright, again, I'm gonna try not to spend too much time on this one, since 1, I really fucking hate talking about it, and 2, I already made a video about this whole thing back when the whole Snapcube thing happened, but like, come on! What can I say about this that isn't already obvious? It's just people blatantly misunderstanding Kanji and Naoto's arcs and making asses of themselves as a result. It doesn't take a genius to understand that Kanji's arc is about toxic masculinity and gender norms, and that Naoto's arc is about how women are traditionally viewed in society and many workplaces. The game isn't even subtle about it, like, especially with Naoto. Like, with Kanji, the game does at least lead you on into thinking he's gay at first before revealing the truth, which effectively makes the player view him the same way that all the people that ridiculed him did, and driving the point home even harder, but, you know, that's not the point, apparently. But with Naoto, her being transgender is never mentioned as a possibility. Like, the game, okay, let's just call it attempts to make you think she's a guy throughout, like, the entire game up to the point where she meets her shadow, and then at the end of the boss, she accepts her shadow, and it's all explained, and it's explained pretty well, too, I think. Like, I seriously don't get how people misinterpret this arc, but anyway, like I said, I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, so I'm just gonna move on before I fucking lose my mind. I look forward to dealing with this bullshit again when the P4 remake comes out. Oh god. Okay, so this is the last one I'm going to be talking about that I've already discussed in a previous video, but in my defense, this one's a little bit different. See, for those who are unaware, about a year ago, I made a video called Understanding Megami Tensei, where I talked about how the consensus on how Megaten as a franchise operates is incredibly inconsistent, and I tried to explain it to the best of my ability. To London Watch, I came to the conclusion that SMT, or Shin Megami Tensei, wasn't actually the main series of Megaten like a lot of people say, and that was more of a misconception caused by all the Megaten games being branded as SMT in the West during the late 2000s and early 2010s. However, something that I originally wanted to discuss in that video, and people actually brought up in the comments, but I ended up having to cut since it wasn't really relevant to the main video, was the relationship between SMT and Persona specifically. See, while I stand by what I said about SMT not being the main series of Megaten, and as a result, not everything other than SMT being a spin-off, the way Persona and SMT in particular interact is very interesting. See, while most series are only related to SMT through the use of Megaten demons, Persona actually did directly spin off from SMT. See, after SMT If was well received for its high school setting, Atlus decided to create an entire sub-series entirely based around a high school setting. Remember this for later because it'll be important. And as a result, Persona was born, originally titled Megami Ibon Roku Persona, with Megami Ibon Roku basically translating to Goddess Stories, or Strange Tale of a Goddess, or Alternate Tale of a Goddess, which basically implies that it's a side story of SMT, with this being reinforced with the fact that Tamaki, the female protagonist from SMT If, shows up at some points in the game. So yeah, despite what I said in the previous video, Persona is a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei is technically an accurate statement. Or at least it used to be. Since then, Persona and SMT have changed a lot, and I think at this point, it's fair to call them entirely separate series, obviously both still within the Megaten franchise. However, despite this, it's not exactly uncommon for elitists online to use Persona's original status as a spin-off to put people that only play Persona down and tell them to, say it with me now, play a real Shin Megami Tensei game. I've even seen people say that Persona is just watered down SMT, which I think is an especially ludicrous thing to say, since the modern incarnations of SMT and Persona are almost nothing alike. Like, the only thing they have in common nowadays, outside of both being JRPGs with anime art styles, is that they both use Megaten demons, and they both have a battle system in which hitting a weakness or a critical hit gives you an extra turn. And even the way that works is completely different. Like, the press turn system is way more focused on your team's actions, where the One More system is far more focused on the actions of individual party members, and the mechanical differences in dynamics and the goals of the battles are all completely different, but we'd be here forever if I was to go into that. So yeah, moral of the story is, don't be a dick. Moving on. Well, we all knew this one was coming. Okay, look, on a level with you, I really don't have too much to say about this. It's pretty self-explanatory why this is dumb, but like, I couldn't not include it. It's like one of the most infamous things about the Persona fanbase. But regardless, I guess I gotta say something, so... look, 90% of these debates tend to just come down to personal preference, meaning that it's just two people arguing over something that's completely subjective and getting unreasonably hated about it. Like, look, you can like whoever you want. Is Oya your favorite girl from Persona 5? I ain't gonna judge. Is Ayana your favorite girl from Persona 4? Okay. Is Ken your favorite romance option from Persona 3? Okay, who's fucking with my notes? Jokes aside though, Ken excluded, there's no real wrong opinion here. I mean, like, you will occasionally get people who try to argue that their waifu is the better one because they're the canon one, and while, like, yeah, the games do have a tendency to favor one specific romance option, cough Aigus/Yukari, cough Rise, cough Sumire, but, like, that doesn't really invalidate anyone's opinion, and at the end of the day, none of this shit really matters. Look, I'm just gonna move on before I start to attract the wrong audience, okay? Okay, good. Next! Okay, admittedly, this one has lessened a lot in recent years due to a reason that I'll get to in a second, but it was such a big thing for such a long time that I couldn't not mention this. See, for those who might be unaware, for years there was a lot of, again, needlessly heated arguments about what the canon names for the protagonists of Persona 3 and 5 were. See, some people were swearing by their manga names, Minato Arisato, or is it Minato or Minato? I've heard it say both. Fuck it, I don't care. This part's not in the script anyway. And Akira Kurosu for the P5 protagonist. since those were the original names they were given. And then there's also people that prefer the names they were given in the anime adaptations, being Makoto Yuki and Ren Amamiya. This probably would have been the case for the Persona 4 protag as well, if it wasn't for the fact that all of P4's spin-offs use his anime name, Yu Narukami. Like, hell, there's a good chance a lot of the people watching this video don't even know that he's called Soji Seta in the manga. That's how well accepted this fucking name is. There's also the strange case of P3's Femc, whose name history is just fucking confusing. Like, fans originally gave her the name Hamiko, which seems to be based off of some translated text in Persona 3 Portable's trailer, I think. She was later given the fan name of Minako Arisato, which is a feminine flip on the male protagonist manga name. At least I think Minako is a fan name. Like, I've heard conflicting stories on where this name actually comes from, but from what I can tell, it looks like it was a fan name that got so popular that it ended up actually being used in official material, although feel free to correct me on that in the comments. Now, all of this looks like it just comes down to personal preference at first, and like, to an extent it definitely does. You can name your character whatever the fuck you want. Like, you can name your character Dick Hammerbush and nobody can tell you otherwise. Except maybe the character limit. I actually don't know if any of the games will give you that many characters for the second name. But the thing is, once canonicity is brought into the conversation, all other arguments kind of just go out the window, since Atlus has kind of always shown a preference for the names from the anime adaptations, with names like Makoto Yuki and Ren Amamiya always being used when they need to give these characters names for whatever reason, which includes the Persona 3 and 5 dancing games. It also includes any mobile phone crossovers, and it was actually in a crossover with Puzzle and Dragons that the Femc would be giving the name Katone Shiomi, which, unlike all the other protags names, was actually taken from the P3P stage play. And fun fact, in that same stage play, the protagonist, the male protagonist that is, goes by the name Sakuya Shiomi, which is something that I think a lot of the people that like to imagine Makoto and Katone as siblings might find quite interesting. But anyway, despite Atlus making their stance very clear though, people continued to argue about these names until the YouTuber hiding in private during his massive Persona 4 retrospective discovered that in the PC version of P4G, the protagonist's name would actually default to Yu Narukami if the game's language was changed after the name was chosen. This led people such as myself to speculate that the, at the time, upcoming PC releases of Persona 5 Royal and Persona 3 Portable would finally end these name debates once and for all. And sure enough, the names Makoto Yuki, Katone Shiomi, and Ren Amamiya were officially mentioned in mainline games. And ever since then, people don't tend to argue about the protag's names as much anymore, with even the Mega 10 Wiki updating the characters' pages to primarily refer to them by these names. You'll still occasionally see people use the other names, but it's usually just personal preference now, and thank God, because these arguments were insufferable to listen to back in the day. Interesting side note though, the Persona 1 protagonist is actually now the only protagonist to not have a canon name, since the names Tatsuya Soo and Maya Amano were never really in Dart in Persona 2. Most people such as myself tend to use his manga name, which is Naoya Toto with the nickname Naorin, but seeing as Atlus tends to never favor the manga names since they have little to no involvement with the manga adaptations outside of, you know, typical licensing stuff, it's possible that if a P1 remake does end up happening, they could give this dude a completely different name in that whole default thing. One possible name is Yuya Narumi, which is the name that he was given in the P1 drama CDs, since those were officially published by Atlus. Or possibly Jihei Suzakuen, I really hope I'm saying that right, with the nickname of Jay from the Persona 1 Shadow Maze novel. I actually kind of like the name Jihei Suzakin because it kind of fits with all of the other characters having nicknames in English. So, you know, Masao Inaba becomes Mark, Eriko Kirishima becomes Ellie, and then, yeah, Jihei Suzakin becomes Jay, but I guess only time will tell if Atlus ever actually grows a pair of balls and fucking remakes P1. Do it, you pussies. Okay, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about anything else that I've already talked about in a previous video, but the thing is, halfway through writing the script, I realized that I couldn't not mention this, since Katone is probably one of, if not the most divisive character in the entire fucking franchise, and that includes non-Persona stuff. Like seriously, just mentioning her name is enough to either give people a boner or start a fucking flame war. Or both. Most of the time it's both. People seem to either absolutely love her like she's the second coming of Christ, or absolutely hate her like she's the second coming of Hitler. Seriously, I don't think I've ever seen people get this irrational over anything in my life. And there's no better example of this than the reaction to her not being in Persona 3 Reload. I'll try to keep this short since I have an entire video about this already, but basically, the FemC fans completely lost their collective shit when she wasn't included. Seriously, I saw people attempting to boycott the game and claim that Atlas was sexist and that they treat women like shit. That is an exact fucking quote I got in a Reddit response once, just because Katone wasn't in Reload. Some people even saying that they had no excuse. Now look, full transparency, I was also pretty disappointed whenever she wasn't included in Reload, mainly because I'm a massive fan of her route in Portable, and I just would have loved to see a version of P3 that includes all the content from all the versions. But from day one, I knew it was a long shot. And that's for the simple reason that the FemC was only added to Portable as a result of circumstance. Atlas was having trouble getting the animated cutscenes to fit onto a UMD, and therefore had to make major compromises to P3's presentation to get it to run on the PSP. It was only as a result of it being such a scaled back version of the game that they were even able to add a female protagonist in the first place, since they had a lot less assets to worry about replacing, most notably the animated cutscenes. Like seriously, the animated cutscenes alone not being there was a massive game changer. So when Reload was announced, I knew whether or not Katone made the cut was in question, since Reload included all of the stuff that Portable couldn't. And the developers have acknowledged this too. After the Episode I Guess expansion was announced, they stated that they did consider adding her to the game at first, but that the hurdles they would have to clear to add her were just too high. There's even leftovers in the game confirming this, with people finding references to both Ryo and Saori as long as female costumes for the protagonist. However, on the other hand, you have the people that hate the FemC for honestly no real reason, as far as I can tell. The only reason I've ever seen people give is the Ken romance, but like, fucking nobody likes the Ken romance. Like, FemC fans hate that shit too. Like, hell, I've even seen a lot of FemC fans say that they hate Ken as a character just for what he's done to Katone's reputation, which, I mean, that's dumb within itself, mind you, but it just makes me question why these people seem to think that that's a justifiable reason to hate Katone as a character. Then again, I have seen these people say that the romance is mandatory, so I do kind of have a suspicion that these people haven't actually played Portable, because if they had, they would know that, unlike with Makoto, Katone's romances are actually optional. I also got a comment on one of my videos once saying that they didn't like the FemC because, and this is a genuine fucking quote, they don't want to play the same game again but with a vagina. So, yeah, I think that says more about these types of people than I ever fucking could. Alright, so I'm gonna be real. This is one of the main reasons I even wanted to make this video in the first place. This debate is so unbelievably stupid that it almost makes me ashamed to be a Persona fan. See, this argument stems from people wanting to be able to discuss Sumire's character without spoiling P5R's big twist. And obviously referring to her as Sumire is gonna set off some alarm bells for people who haven't played the third semester yet. Which is very ironic, by the way, because the Persona fandom is like one of the most spoiler-heavy fandoms I think I've ever seen. Like, Persona fans spoil everything, and they don't try to not spoil anything. Like, a lot of the major plot points for Persona 3 and 4 I had spoiled for me before I even played the fucking game, so I find it very ironic that this is the one thing that people are protective of. But anyway, some people just took to calling her Sumi, since the two names that she goes by are Kasumi and Sumire. So that way it just comes off as like a nickname, similar to like Shinji or Aki from Persona 3. Meanwhile, others, and the majority seemingly, have just taken to calling her Yoshizawa, since that's her last name and it doesn't change either way. I shouldn't have to explain why this is a dumb argument, but for those who somehow don't see the issue here, you can just fucking call her Kasumi! Seriously, how are people this fucking dumb? She was called Kasumi in all the marketing for the game, and every time Atlas has used her since then, like in merchandise or even in Tactica's DLC, they just call her Kasumi. Atlas already gave us the answer. What, are you afraid people are gonna mistake you for talking about her sister? How? Her sister isn't a character. She's a plot device who we know literally nothing about. And even if someone somehow did make the mistake, I think they would quickly pick up on what you're talking about just based off of the context. Because like I said, we literally know nothing about her actual sister. Like, we don't know anything about the actual Kasumi. Or is it because people are afraid of disrespecting her? Because if so, newsflash, she's not fucking real, so she can't be offended. And that's not even to mention that just calling her Yoshizawa kind of causes its own set of problems. Because, for the most part, whenever the fanbase refers to characters, they typically refer to them by whatever the UI does. So, for example, characters like all of the Phantom Thieves except for Akechi, Sojiro, Chihaya, Hifumi, Sai, and even Shiho usually get referred to by their first names, since that's how the game refers to them. Meanwhile, characters like I said, Akechi, along with Kawakami, Takemi, Oya, Iwai, and Yoshida, are all usually referred to by their last names because, again, that's how the game refers to them. Whereas with Sumire, the game always refers to her by her first name from the cleanup event onwards. It calls her Kasumi all the way up until you get the third semester where it starts calling her Sumire. And even before that, it calls her student named Yoshizawa, so it makes it very clear that you're going to learn her first name at some point. So to newer players, it might seem a little bit suspicious that despite the fact that everyone else sticks to the same naming scheme, with her in particular, they call her by her last name, even though the game refers to her by her first name. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, that also causes its own set of problems, and nobody seems to even realize that, but whatever. I'm just gonna move on before I pop a fucking blood vessel. Just, guys, be fucking smarter than this, for the love of God. And here we have the other main reason I wanted to make this video. Now, if you've been in the Persona community for any length of time, you'll definitely have heard at least one person say how they want the next game to have either an adult or, more commonly, a college-aged cast. It's one of the most requested things among the Western fans, since a lot of people don't find high school settings very interesting in the West. Now, I actually don't hate this idea. I think a Persona game with a college-age cast could be really interesting and could lead to a lot of new and interesting scenarios that aren't really possible with a high school cast. But there's two major problems with this. One, like I said earlier, Persona was literally created to capitalize on how much people liked SMT-If's high school setting. Having a high school setting is literally baked into its identity. And yes, before anyone says it, I'm fully aware that Persona 2 Eternal Punishment had an adult cast. Everyone knows that, and yet it still always gets brought up like this huge revelation whenever the topic of an older cast is brought up. You see, the difference with Eternal Punishment was that it was unique in that it was the second part of a larger story. If you look at Innocent Sin, it actually does have a mostly high school cast with only 2 of the 6 party members being adults. Eternal Punishment having a mainly adult cast was only a result of the choice to make Maya the protagonist, since she was one of the 2 adult party members in the first game. Not to mention that Eternal Punishment is by far the worst selling mainline Persona game, which brings me to the second issue, and that's that in Japan, high school settings are extremely popular. This is because in Japan, high school is considered to be the best years of your life, which over here you do hear high school is the best years of your life, but I think most people can agree that's absolute bullshit. In Japan, college is kind of treated more like work, where it's kind of just grind, whereas over here, college is mostly seen as a lot more relaxed than high school, at least that's what it's like in the UK. All of this to say, I think people in the Western fanbase sometimes forget that at the end of the day, these games are primarily made with a Japanese audience in mind, and that cultural difference naturally is going to cause a slight divide from what Western audiences find appealing. This is actually very obvious in the comedy in these games, like all the scenes where the best friend character just kind of gets fucked up for absolutely no reason. It's just simply something that's funny in Japan. I don't get it myself. That's not to say that it's wrong for people to want this. I just think people need to be more mindful of who makes these games before they start complaining about it and saying that they won't support the next game if they're still in high school. It's really just a thing that we all kind of have to accept as Western fans of this franchise, unfortunately. Alright, so that's gonna pretty much do it for this video. This was actually a lot of fun to make, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to let me know in the comments, because I could probably make a second part of this if I tried. So yeah, let me know if you want to see another part, and actually leave me suggestions in the comments for Persona debates that you think I might have missed, because God knows this fucking community gets into a lot of arguments. Yeah, the second part of this could definitely be made. So yeah, definitely let me know in the comments. And that's all I really have to say for this video, so yeah, bye.